In a world where God is dying, 4 heathens come to deliver the final nails in the coffin. From the depths of hell, Satan sends 4 puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists from the Middle East.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the host of the Secular Jihadist podcast, Al Khalifa Faisal Mutar, and we have a wonderful guest. But let's start with the usual suspects of the show. Yasmin Muhammad, the author of Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. Hello, Yasmin.
Hello, Faisal. You know, it took me a second to think about that because I usually answer Alhamdulillah, but I'm not going to say that. Koyisa. I don't know. What do people say?
Yeah, Koyisa is good. It's more moderate jihadist answer.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. You say Alhamdulillah Darwin is what you say. That's what atheists say. So, anyway.
Speaking of Darwin, we have Al-Rizvi, the author of The God Delusion.
Of course. Speaking of Darwin, God Delusion. You haven't done that for a while, the God Delusion thing.
Anyway. I now have memory. So Ali is speaking in Ohio, right? You're speaking at the Ohio end of the month?
I am. I'm speaking at U of T on September 21st in Toronto, the University of Toronto. I'm also speaking in Cleveland, Ohio on September 29th with the CFI in Ohio. So
with the CFI or with CFI?
With CFI.
Oh, I see. I thought they're all
CFI, like as in what do you mean with what? How many CFIs?
You said there? With the CFI because I'm like, as if there's like there are 5 people.
Oh, did I? No.
Perfect, nice little people. And with us, as usual, we have the Armin Navabi, the leader of the Quds force of the Iranian regime. Hello, Armin.
Hi.
And he also happens to be the founder of Atheist Republic, the largest online platform for free thinkers in the world, actually.
Yeah, I'm more proud of that than starting the Quds Army.
The Quds Army is pretty good.
And with us, we have Nushin. It's actually we have a story with Nushin. I met her in Los Angeles with a mutual friend of ours who happens to also invite Yasmin to speak in Los Angeles. Was Orly Peter. So we met more than I think probably 5-6 times. Like every time I'm in LA, I happen to see Nushin, and we also met when I think Asra was in Los Angeles as well, Asra Nomani. So I have got to know each other, and what's wonderful is that there was a house party-ish that we had recently in Los Angeles, and Nushin happened to share, because I didn't know much about her story. All I know that she's a woman of color, but after
what else do you need to know? That's all that matters. But that means everything you say should be taken as the word of God.
So on that house party-ish that we had at the patio, Nushin happened to share her story that I found to be extremely inspiring. And I think and then I told her like, oh, maybe you should come to our podcast, and also introduce her to Dave Rubin. Hopefully he will reply soon when he gets back from Afghanistan, because he's joining the Taliban over there. I saw that he grew a beard and stuff, so he might probably have joined Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or Mullah Omar when he's
trying to blend in.
He's trying to blend in. So I mean, I probably know a bit about your story, but I want it to come from you. So let's start with the beginning. Tell us more about yourself. What do you do? I mean, I know you're a professor at UCLA, but I think you are much more than just a title. So I would like to, I think us and our audience like to know how do you introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Thank you for this really, really kind introduction, Faisal. Yeah. I am a lecturer at UCLA right now, but before coming to the United States, I used to work as a media monitor for an institution called BBC Monitoring. And what we did was we monitored the media in Afghanistan. We translated news and we packaged it, summarized it, so that we got a sense of how the people on the ground in Afghanistan responded to the political developments all the time. So that's what I used to do before. And that's where my interest in the media actually comes from, because when I was working there, I noticed that the way Afghans discussed their own country was very, very different from the way the media in the West discussed Afghanistan. So you could see a sort of a big gap between very different perspectives. So that's what got me interested in sort of what we can do actually to use the media, the global media, which is now accessible, right? I mean, you can get the media of the Arab world and Afghanistan and Iran. You can get it online. It has never before been this accessible, actually, right? So we know exactly how the publics react to events, right? And that gives you sort of a straight line to the mental landscape, let's say, of the region. So that was my background before I started becoming a lecturer here in the United States. But I also published a book, because between getting my position as a lecturer and BBC monitoring, I used to write about Afghanistan for The Guardian. That's what you have been referring to earlier, right? I used to write articles. Yeah. So that evening when we were all there at Oli's place, what happened was, and I think this is what happened to all of you, right? So we had such strange lives. We had seen so much sort of serious existential drama in our lives, that to make sense of it and draw the right conclusions from it, it's a tough thing. It's not easy. And, as I have been thinking a lot about sort of how to make sense of my life, the fact that I was born in Afghanistan and that my childhood, happened when we had a Marxist-Leninist coup d'etat in a super conservative Muslim country. And the fact that then Afghanistan became the place that inspired the current waves of jihad globally, right? Because Afghanistan was the first successful story of jihad in the Muslim world. The first time that Muslims beat an empire, right? An infidel Western empire, the Soviet Empire. This is the story that inspired thousands of people. And anyone who is a name in the terrorist scenes, they all have their forefathers in the 1980s in Afghanistan. The people who inspired them.
The very word mujahideen is derived from jihad.
Exactly.
So, mujahideen who were heroes, Ronald Reagan called them heroes.
He did, that's true. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. At that time, there were actually people who waged jihad.
That was the first generation. And so, and then my family, we became refugees in Germany, and I was educated in Germany, and then I left for postgraduate studies to the United Kingdom, and I ended up in the Anglo-Saxon world. So I have seen and experienced a lot, and I was trying to make sense of all my experiences that evening when I was talking, and I realized that yes, we need to stand up for the achievements of the West.
Mm-hmm. And you can you give us a just timeline? When did you leave Afghanistan?
So we left in 1988, which was already kind of, the war was continuing, and the war had started in 1978. So right. It was already, but the outcome was not yet clear whether it was going to be the Mujahideen who were going to win, which is actually what happened. But what's really interesting about that is that in that period in history, the left fought the Islamists, right? The Afghan regime was a leftist secular regime. And the Mujahideen were the Islamists who fought them. And the West was allied with the Mujahideen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the other way around.
Yeah.
It was completely different from how it is now.
Exactly. And now
Yeah.
we see a very different picture, which is very puzzling. So, and sort of, I thought about that, and I thought we shouldn't forget that chapter in history. Because this was the beginning of everything that came afterwards, in terms of encouraging people to join jihad and do it globally. The fact that they had tested victory, right, in Afghanistan, and then the price that Afghans paid. And then sort of the repercussions for Iran, for example, and for Pakistan, and also, of course, Iraq and all the other countries. So that chapter in history, which is something we should remember when the left brings it up, right? Let's not criticize the Middle East. It's their culture. We shouldn't talk about it, because there is this part of their history that they would rather forget, huh?
Yeah, there is. And your book is called Afghan Rumor Bazaar.
Yes.
And so what's the story behind that title?
The story is that I was very eager to find out the truth in Afghanistan. And I dare say, again, with a history like ours, we just can't free ourselves fully from where we came from, because the place that hurts you is the place that you're interested in, right? So, and I was deeply interested in figuring out what's going on in Afghanistan. And what I realized was that all you got was stories, that there was no way you could verify the truth. You just got many different versions of stories about the same thing. And they changed so rapidly, that sort of, there was no relationship between reality and how reality was represented. So it was a bit like Arabian Nights, sort of people embellished stories. And when they embellished it, it was in order to make a point, right? To illustrate a moral, let's say, a moral point of view. So that's why rumor, because rumor reveals a lot in a society. It also reveals wishful thinking, for example.
So Nushin, I have a question.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead. I missed what you said there.
The rumor can be an example of wishful thinking or wishful dreaming. For example, when I was there in 2011, Afghans were very, very determined that the Americans were not going to leave. And I was telling them, look, they are planning to leave, and that's what they are discussing abroad. When you're in the West, you can see them. That's why they actually voted for Obama, in order to make sure the troops come back home. Oh, no, they're here because we have natural treasures, we have minerals, and that's what they're after. And that's why they will stay here. They have invested so much. So I realized later, studying rumors a bit more, that actually this is what they hope. They do wish and hope that the Americans stay. And you have these crazy stories where people would say, my grandma saw American troops digging into the ground and looking for natural treasures. I mean, that's an impossible story, obviously.
So to be clear to the audience, what you're saying is that it seemed like an accusation when they were saying it, that they're going to stay, but it wasn't like, oh, they're never going to leave. But actually it wasn't an accusation. It's inside and it was actually a hope. So they made it sound like an accusation. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Clear. Because a lot of people, obviously, the economy took off for a lot of people, because we had sort of a whole service industry, translators, taxi drivers, the needs of the foreign troops, and then, of course, the whole international community representatives that came to Afghanistan. A whole new economy grew out of it, right? So obviously, and the two were connected. It was somewhat artificial in that sense. So obviously, people, not everyone wanted them gone.
Hypocritical, aren't they? Like, oh, the West shouldn't intervene, but then they secretly hope that they do intervene.
But that's a story everywhere in all of these places. And there's this in Iraq, the West intervened, so they destroyed everything. In Syria, they backed off a little bit and they should have gone in. In Libya, they kind of went half-assed. There's always whether they go in or whether they don't. The thing is, over there, I think it's a consequence of people over there not having the choice. When they can't vote, they don't choose their own fate. They're always under dictatorships. They're always being told what to do. So it's all outcome based. When the outcome is bad, you go retrospectively and you need to find something else to blame because you're not given that responsibility. You didn't have any choice in it, right?
People here do that too, though. People here do the exact same thing. Yeah,
they do. But over there, it's like an epidemic. It's I mean, and it's you can't blame them for it either. You know, there's like Mossadegh in the no, I mean in the sense that like for instance in Iran, right? You had 1953, the British and the CIA got together and they overthrew the democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh, right? So that's a very famous thing. Obama later went and apologized for it many years later.
He did?
But that was
He apologized?
Yeah, he apologized for it when he
was
Obama
apologized for so many things. I've kind of lost.
He apologized for a lot of things, but I mean that one was actually merited because that was an actual conspiracy that everybody talked about, and then it didn't happen. But now when Iranians, when they talk about conspiracies, they're like, there's this conspiracy. And when you tell them, you're like, you're crazy. This is not a conspiracy. And they're like, oh yeah, what about 1953? And then you don't know what to say because that was an actual real thing that happened. So that confounds it even more.
But when Iran invaded Iraq, when United States invaded Iraq, I remember in my school, all the kids, this was before what they saw happen to Iraq after. But before they saw, they were like, we are next. We are next. We are going to be like, they were hoping that the United States is going to come and liberate them next. That was so they have the Mossadegh story, but they also hope that United States would have come and liberated them from the mullahs.
That's a contradiction. Every Pakistani wants a green card to go to the U.S. They all go on lottery. They will leave their entire families and they'll come to America with a green card, never go back. But when they come to America, like how much they hate America and how it's no better than
the world. This place.
People become nationalists, huh? When they come abroad, they become nationalists again. It's really interesting.
They do. It's all about identity, you know.
So Nushin, I wanted to ask you about your journey for truth that you mentioned. So you said you wrote your book because you were looking for the truth, and you found all these rumors, and nobody's really giving a full story. And so, as you were going through this journey, I want to ask you what you discovered in the end, because you did mention that you want us to stand up for Western values. So was that like the conclusion of your journey?
It took a long time. So it wasn't that straightforward. As you all know, when you take that path, it's a really bumpy road and it's back and forth. What I realized with Afghanistan was that basically the story was super, super complex. And yes, that Afghans were very much involved naturally, because that's their country, that they were very much involved in what was happening in the country too. And it wasn't true that it's only the West to be blamed, right? That Westerners make mistakes. They made mistakes, but they made mistakes sort of with the help of Afghans, let's say, who were working with them, right? So, and the sense of detachment to me, it appeared that they really had no sense of responsibility for what was going on in Afghanistan. And it might be because they were overwhelmed. I don't know. I give you an example. So people often complain that the government is corrupt, right? Sentence one, this government is so incredibly corrupt. Correct, true. And then 2 minutes later, they would say, my cousin is in the government. Right? So, and they didn't connect the two, that yes, you are also part of this government, basically.
And I'm going to ask my cousin for help.
Absolutely. And actually that was showing off, I have someone in the government. And, before that, it was like, this is a very corrupt. So I felt like they really lost the sense of they have any say, any kind of, agency, to be honest. Yeah. And in what was going on, but they were very much responsible. Security, for example, I think Afghanistan could have been a lot more secure, but people are fatalistic. So the approach.
I think that's an Islam thing.
I can give you a concrete example. So 2 things that Westerners never noticed. I think they noticed, but they couldn't talk about it because they feared they would be called racist. And that has to do with security and terrorism. So, one is that people are very polite. We have an informal, warm culture, just like in the Arab world, right? You have the brutal side, but you also have the very warm and kind of friendly and familiar side of culture, which Westerners often notice when they go there. They're overwhelmed. Like, oh, these people are so warm. They immediately welcome you. So that side was evident. For example, when we had checkpoints where women were searching the bags. In one case, it was a very famous, the Intercontinental Hotel. And the women who were checking the bags, and that was in the summer. So that's the season of war. So she first refused to, one of them was pregnant to begin with, right? One of them was pregnant. The other one was, I think, her mom, and they were watching TV. And when I gave them my bag, they said, oh, sister, don't worry. I'm not going to look because we know what you have in your bag. We know what women have in their bags. It's lipstick and stuff. And she was just being kind and being polite, right? So I begged her. I said, look, please do check. I want you to check my bag. So she did, but not really thoroughly, right? And then we went to the second checkpoint.
So if you were a jihadi, you could have learned from that situation.
Totally. And that hotel came under attack like 2 days later. And ISAF had to be sent, helicopters. And then, so the second checkpoint, again, we are all friendly because people have to help each other, right? Just like in the Arab world, you become close and you help each other because there are no institutions to help you. The state is your enemy. So people try to help each other as much as they can, and they hope that they will get something later from you, right? So we get to the second checkpoint, and he says, well, you're not allowed to come in because you're not officially here. And my friend and I were there. We said, oh, look, this was where we used to play as kids, and we have sentimental memories, and can you let us in? He said, okay, tell them you're here for a meeting. Just tell them that because there was a meeting underway, and he let us in. So that was sort of complete breach of security. And of course, we joined in, right? Like we happily went in. And then 2 days later, the hotel came under attack. And I was not at all surprised. So I went to the manager of the hotel where we were staying, which had like huge windows. So it was and Western journalists stayed there. So that was prime kind of, like target for terrorists. And the manager was, he was very, very happy. He could move to Canada, he had realized. So he was very happy. So and I tell him, look, we just had an attack. What should we do in case there is an attack here? Because you see, we have all these windows. And he says, oh yeah, we have a door that leads us to the next building. I think it was UNHCR or something. So I said, can you show me this door? Oh, okay. So reluctantly he comes with me and he puts the key and he turns and he turns and he turns. Nothing. The door is locked. So, and obviously no one has checked the door, right? For ages. They just assumed it works. Turns out it's not working. So I said, well, it's not working. He said, well, you can kick the door. And it was like a metal door, right? And you don't know, I'm a small woman, I'm short, I'm a small woman, I'm not a strong woman. So I'm like, there's no way I can kick this door. He said, well, if you're supposed to die, you're going to die anyway.
Oh, yeah. See, I told you that's an Islamic thing.
Yes. So that's like this fatalistic, which I think it has a positive side. I mean, I'm not going to just say this is just insane. I think, yes, accepting death as a fact of life is a great thing, right? In the West, we don't have that. In the West, we have pushed death out of the public sphere. We only get it stylized in crime dramas, but that death is a reality. People never experience it, right? It's in the hospital and it's pushed out of the public sphere. So I do like the fact that in Islam, it's taken completely for granted that death is part of life and you have to accept it when it comes.
I guess a happy medium would be nice.
Yes, exactly. In that context, it was completely, it was very counterproductive. Plus, I told them, look, these people are Westerners, they don't believe in faith. They don't believe in that. So you have to do something about them, right? So, but it was no longer his concern. And that's sort of, and I think you can't survive, in Afghanistan unless sort of you become really, really accepting of anything. But, So that's the kind of thing you don't read about, right? How people themselves are somewhat complicit in the worsening of the security situation. And it is because the culture, the wonderful side of culture, warmth and familiarity, trust, it becomes counterproductive.
Mm-hmm. Armin, you had a question. You said earlier, right?
I had a devil's advocate question because you mentioned that
Armin's our resident devil's advocate.
Sometimes
that's very good.
So you mentioned like we need to recognize the greatness of the West and the things that they have achieved. But what if somebody says, well, this is what the West does for itself. Everywhere else, it causes, they don't, these are the values that they want from themselves, but everywhere else, they put in power dictators, they cause wars, they go and take advantage of people's resources, and they play games and put forces, different proxies against each other and take advantage of people. So yes, they're great for their own nations, but they cause all these problems. Yes, we are responsible for some of these problems too, but the West also takes advantage.
They don't say that. Who says that?
I'm trying to be a strong devil's advocate, not like a weak devil's advocate. Yeah.
So that's a great question. So I don't say that the West is great. That's, I don't say that, but definitely of every other kind of model of running a country we have available to us where we can draw comparisons, it's very obvious that the way the West is run is, for now, like as far as we understand, this is the most humane way because they not only take care of their own people, but they can also take in other people like us, right? The ones who lose their own country because of war, the refugees. So, and this kind of, and you can be a complete stranger. No one has ever met you. That kind of trust that they let in, like 1 million, 2 million people and accept it and say, okay, we are going to deal with this, right? When that comes, when countries in other parts of the world do the same thing, then I'm ready to say, okay, we are all great, right?
Arabs don't even take in other Arab refugees.
Yes. So, I don't think that we have the moral high ground to make these kind of claims. So, and say that the West is evil or the West is the only place that is evil. Everywhere is evil. But the evil that I've seen in the rest of the world by far surpasses what you see here, let's say.
Yeah, there's also this, just this idea that, again, it's the whole damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. So, what you have is you have all of these dictators in all of these countries. So on one hand, you don't want the West to intervene. You don't want them to come in and do things. On the other hand, like if they start supporting indigenous sort of democratic rebellions or pro-democracy rebellions, then that can backfire as, they were careful in 2009 with the Iran revolution. They were very careful on supporting because they said that if the moment we say we support the rebels, everyone's going to unite against America, right? So there's that issue. And at the same time, they do have to work with these countries. They have to trade. They have to have diplomatic relations. So it's actually really it's a juggling game, and it's not the kind of thing I think anybody can be happy with when you have one superpower is trying to deal with everybody.
Yes and no, because when some people point out that these countries pretend to be human rights like champions of the world, but then they go and support Saddam, and then they go support Sisi, and then they go support...
Yeah, but if we could just stop for a second, because I think what Nushin said was really important. Like, everybody in this podcast right now is an immigrant to the West. I mean, I personally am not, but my parents were. So just that in and of itself, I think, is a good counter argument.
Right, because we realize that those countries will never get the benefits from the West unless you are in the West.
The West is not the world's police. The world is it's not the world's father.
Yes, but they pretend to be.
If people want to make changes in their own countries, then it's their responsibility to make changes in their own country. Nobody came and helped America become America. They became America for
Well,
themselves.
That's the point, though.
The slaves helped a lot, actually.
You can't. They say they shouldn't police, but then they do come and police, and they put people like Saddam and the Saudis are basically American puppets.
Actually, they took Saddam out.
No, they aren't. So that there, I completely disagree. And one thing, if I may sort of add, is that in like when I was growing up in Afghanistan and even later in Germany, I really didn't have a proper sense of what the West was about, right? So what we don't get, we get basically the leftist narrative of the West. That's the issue, right? We only get sort of we get a truth.
Imperialist.
Yes, which is true, but it's not the full picture. It's only a slice of the truth. It's only a slice of the truth. For example, one thing that we completely ignore is the concept of philanthropy in the West, right? The fact that charity is very, very strong here, and that whenever there is a disaster, people volunteer to help. That in the West, actually, when you kind of speak up and say, there is this problem, people say, how can we help you? Right? Mm-hmm. They say, how can we help you solve this problem? And they are engaged in that. Like even animals are looked way, they're looked after very well here, right? And sort of the philanthropy that you encounter in the West, the kindness that is there towards the strangers, and that is also the left, right? That is also the left. I don't want to bash them entirely. I think, certain things, yes, I'm grateful to them for the fact that they always stand up for our rights, right?
Well, yeah, reason, science, rationality, education, a lot of these things are, that's what they mean by progressive. That's what they're doing.
And we have found cures for many, many illnesses, right? Actually, the world is in a much better place than it has been when you compare it to 100 years ago. It's way, way, way better, right? It's a much better place to live in. And sort of, but the image that is projected is of a terrible place. And that's because it doesn't live up to something that people imagine, right? An ideal that they imagine.
Some utopia that doesn't exist.
To your point, actually, we're talking on Google Hangouts and Skype, which are American products, and these ideas are spreading all over the world because of American products. But I think the key is for people not to talk about the West as if it's just one entity. There's, the West is so many different things, and there's good and bad things. But one thing, again, to your point, is that whenever there's a natural disaster, whenever there's a disease outbreak, it's usually countries like the United States where they first arrive there, and those are the countries that usually the last ones to leave, right? No matter where it happens.
Yeah, so the concept of philanthropy is something that is kind of, is completely kind of brushed under the carpet. Plus the fact that now, since the end of World War II, like it's not only people who go to the West in search of better lives. We also, take in people who flee political oppression. So, there's a lot of goodness going on here, a lot of goodwill. And for me, I think it's very troublesome that we keep nagging, right? We never say thank you. Mm-hmm. Right? So we never say thank you. We appreciate that not everybody is ungrateful and just says, hey, you could do better. Right? So I was fed up of being put into the role of sort of someone who is used to guilt trip Westerners.
Oh, I totally hear that from like the bottom of my heart. I get that. I went through that exact same process as you.
And I had sort of when a broadcaster sent me an email, and they, it was at the time when we had, of course, the problem of terrorism was becoming very evident in Europe, and the way people tried to play it down was to guilt trip Westerners and say, hey, we have bomb attacks in Iraq every day, and you never say anything, right? Sort of to divert the attention away. And when I had that email, I couldn't bring myself to guilt trip people.
And also, just to add, many of these people are really hypocrites, right? It's like, for example, there is an explosion in Iraq almost every week, right? And many of these people don't put like the Iraqi flag in solidarity or anything. They only do that when there is a terrorist attack happening in the West, and then they tell the people, why aren't you worried about the attack in Iraq? And now, because I've been dealing with this for quite a while is like, oh, so now you are giving more coverage to the attack in Barcelona or London, but you're not giving to Baghdad. But even though there was like 20,000 terrorist attacks in Baghdad for the past 10 years, and you never change your profile picture or anything. But the moment it became the West, and then like they say the New York Times or the BBC are covering the attack in the West, they're like, oh, how about Iraq? How about this? So like, and the thing is like, what I think some of it is really sadistic is that they are really looking for that terrorist attack to happen in a Muslim country so they can like, see, told you so, see, like they don't care. Like it's like they are they are just waiting. Like it's like the terrorist attack happening in the West. I was like, okay, when Al Qaeda is gonna attack Afghanistan or whatever, like Iraq or whatever, then they're like, oh, why don't you care about the attack in Iraq? Even though there was one in Iraq last week, but I didn't talk about it or even cared or even shared. But I just want to make the point that the West is very hypocritical, and in my opinion, is quite immoral because they don't see. The thing is, like, they don't care about the lives of the people that they claim to be caring about, right?
Yeah, because when was the last time they cared about the people that were dying in Darfur? Or when was the last time they cared about people in Yemen?
So we have different classes of victims, right? So it's not like all victims of victims. If you're killed by Americans, you're victim number one. You're the victim that will be, everybody.
Or the Israelis, actually, because in Darfur, what happened in Darfur was you had black Muslims, 500,000 of them that were killed by Arab Muslims, right? Which is like Omar al-Bashir. And that didn't really matter. But, that was way more, many magnitude times more than the death toll that you have of Palestinians that are killed by Israelis. And but that is a big deal because the person who's doing the killing is Israel, right? Or the country that's doing the killing.
Yeah, that's the top one. Like Israel, and then followed by America, and then if there is any other kind of Western country.
Maybe France is number 3.
If only Assad was Jewish, everybody would be worried about what's happening in Syria. The entire Muslim world would go in. So
exactly, which shows you that it's a political game, and it's not about victims. It's using guilt tripping. Now I always exactly, and I tell people because they try to guilt trip me. They think, well, Nushin is a liberal. That means we can guilt trip her because they can guilt trip Western liberals, right? So I always say, Jesus Christ didn't die for me. So you can't guilt trip
Speaking
me.
of Jesus Christ. Well, I wanted to ask, I heard Thomas Friedman, who's a New York Times columnist who everybody seems to have a problem with, which is why I like him a lot because he seems very reasonable to me.
When everybody has a problem with a person, you have to read their books.
There you go. See, that's why. So Thomas Friedman actually said something once where he was talking about how the element of envy in the Muslim world. So there is, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and I know in the papers over there, you could not say anything negative about the government. So the only thing that people read, and at that time you didn't really have the internet, so all they were reading was, Israel this and the US that and this and that. So those are the only two things that they thought were a problem. Nobody ever read any issue with the Saudi royal family. So there's that kind of brainwashing. But then on top of that, he said something else. He said that, a lot of people in the Muslim world, they think that they've got the most updated version of the truth. They've got Islam. Islam is 3.0. Christianity was 2.0. Judaism was 1.0. So why is 1.0 doing so well, 2.0 doing so well, and then 3.0? We're like the updated upgrade, and we're getting screwed over all over the place. So we have to do something about it. Do you think, I know that's a very simplistic way of stating it, but I just thought it was an interesting idea just in terms of, do you think there is a sense of grievance that we have been ripped off, or in the Muslim world that, we've been ripped off? We've got the right version of the truth. Why are we not doing it? Like, Obama comes to Cairo, does a speech. People are like, wow, my brother's name is Hussein and Obama's middle name is Hussein. We have the same name. The guy has a similar skin tone to me. His father was from Kenya, which is a poorer country than me. How come he's president of the US and I've got 70% unemployment in my country? Like when they see things like that, do you think that aspect of in the Muslim world and even the religion aspect, how much of a role do you think that has?
Well, the Oh, there are so many, you had so many questions in one question, and they're all so interesting. So I try to answer them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Better. No,
Yeah.
it's good. So let's try that.
I think I was more ranting as well as part of the question.
I do believe that, I do believe that a part of the sort of expectation in the Muslim world to do better than they are doing, which is a great expectation, right? Why not? You want to do better. That's a good thing. But it's rooted in the fact that it used to be an empire, right? And when you look at the Ottoman Empire, and I mean, they didn't even take no, they were not frightened of Europe while Europe was becoming modern, right? They were not frightened of them. They were like, why? We are the Ottoman Empire, right? Why should we be worried about these guys? And by the time they realized, oh God, we have some catching up to do, right? It was already more or less too late. So the imperial history is a fact that informs the way people feel about themselves, right? There's nostalgia about the glorious lost glory. The fact that
we had the caliphate. You're right. Yeah,
that's a Sunni thing, though, not a Shia
thing. That is true. But the sense that is absolutely true. I haven't felt it with the Shia, but with the Shia, they're more obsessed with justice and getting their version of Islam also globalized. That's kind of, the latest mission, it seems.
That's actually one thing a lot of people don't know. When Ahmadinejad used to go around talking about wiping out Israel, like in reality, he knows that if he does a strike on Israel, well, this is back when Ahmadinejad was in power, but even now, they know if they do a strike there, they're going to kill loads of Palestinians. They know it's suicidal. The retaliation will totally destroy them. But the reason he says it is because people who've lived in the Arab world, I know there's Arab dictators like in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, they would be they wouldn't say anything against Israel publicly, right? They wouldn't openly say it. But the people over there did not like Israel. So when they hear Ahmadinejad say it, they're like, that leader's got balls. Our guy doesn't. And then, so the whole Shia and the Persian influence, that's he gets more solidarity from Arab citizens,
he doesn't get solidarity
right?
from Iranian people, which hated the obsession.
No, not from Iranian people.
He's a hero in the Arab world.
From Arabs, the broader Arabs, right? So it's more of a messaging and a propaganda thing. And these are really complex, sort of like Persian Shia, Sunni, Persian Arab, all of these dynamics that play together that are very difficult for the average person in the West to understand.
But don't try to sell Ahmadinejad as somebody that knew what he was doing. I'm not saying you're defending him, but he was in right now he's alone. Like he doesn't have the religious people backing him or the left backing him. Everybody is against him in Iran. He's actually can't even go visit.
I'm talking about overall.
They're arresting his supporters. He can't even go visit them. He's really bad at tactics.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I was saying overall, like the kind of rhetoric that comes out of Iran. He was seen as a hero in the Arab
world. That is true because that's a regime that has nothing to lose, right? So
but I would argue that kind of backfired. Like backfired, especially during the Syrian civil war, when Iran started getting more involved in supporting Assad and Hezbollah get more involved in supporting Assad, and considering that Assad's main victims, I mean, he has many victims, but a large significant number of them happen to be Sunni Muslims. And what happened is that Iran's reputation now at least in the Sunni Arab world, I mean, if you look at the Shia Iraqis, many of them are pro-Assad and pro-Iran, but if you look at Sunnis from all across the region, they hate Iran right now, mainly because for supporting the guy who kills the Sunnis. I mean, the propaganda against. I mean, one of the things
Shia
is like
Sunnis just hate Shias in general.
Yes. So they hate the Shia, plus the Shia is killing Sunnis. So that's kind of like. So like even Al Jazeera, for example, which is not in any sense a moderate channel, but there have been shows that explicitly calls for killing Shias. Like, I mean, so it's not like it's no longer just like hidden terms that they use about like Safawiyun, like the Safawites, and no, it's like the Shiites need to be killed. Like you have somebody who's like a show with a suit and a tie, and he's like, the Shiites need to be killed. Like, and this is very recent. I mean, I've been watching Al Jazeera for quite a while, but to see them not to see them, but to see some of their hosts or some of their people explicitly calling for death of Shias is kind of, especially Iranians, it's kind of very modern.
Iran has done well, though. Iran has done very well though recently to spread its.
They have.
They
have won.
But that's not credit.
But to Faisal's point, there at one point, like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Palestinians were supporting them. Everybody supported the Palestinians. Like Iran did really have. They kind of the whole Assad thing has sort of shifted the balance.
Iran is now in full control of Iraq. Unfortunately, soon they will have control over Syria. They have a lot of control in Lebanon. They're trying to get more control in Yemen. And this is no thanks to the presidency. People think that the foreign minister of Iran is the person in charge of the foreign armies. It's the Sepah Pastaran. It's the Revolutionary Guard that does anything without the permission of the president and directly reports to the Khamenei himself. Nothing the foreign minister says really matters when it comes to the Middle Eastern policies of Iran. Mm-hmm. That's just the show thing.
So let's move back to Nushin.
How about if we move this conversation towards
Can I say something about what Nushin said?
You guys are digging really deep
bring it
down.
Back to what Yas is saying. To her point, like, when I have been stopped in the airport for random screening around 13 times now. And I don't know if it's just my luck or is it profiling, but I posted this on Facebook and a lot of people were like, oh, this is wrong, this is racism. And I had to respond, like, listen, if I go back to Iran, they'll hang me, okay? Canada is a country that welcomed me with open arms. I'm a Canadian citizen now, and it was so easy. And now I'm living here. This is the country that I owe so much to. And I'm not going to start complaining about 30 seconds of having to go through a machine, which is actually kind of cool anyways, to that in the airport. And that's not, when the country that I was born in will never welcome me back, when a country that I was born in is going to hang me for just having a different opinion.
But don't you feel sad though? Sorry to interrupt. Like for example, it's weird. I have not been stopped in the airport many times, probably 3 times maximum. But I kind of felt a bit disappointed because considering that like most of my work is really about countering terrorism and fighting these idiots like Al-Qaeda and stuff, to be kind of treated as a potential extremist because of the way I look also feels a bit bad. I'm not saying this. I understand the reasons why they're doing it. I understand that many people who are Iraqis, not many, but like some Iraqis are members of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all these terrorist groups. But it kind of feels sad that you get profiled even though you are...
Yes, it feels sad, but it's less sad than hanging from a rope.
No, I'm not comparing, but that's a kind of low standard. It's
but that doesn't make it good.
You're saying, for example, well, rape in the West is not as bad because the woman can report it here, and in Iran they cannot report it.
But what do you expect, though? Like, what I understand that you're saying it feels sad, but if you look at it from another point of view, like, I understand that it's sad, but what is the answer?
I think,
obviously, Muslims are the ones that are killing people across the planet daily.
Actually,
so
there may not be.
I get stopped at the airport all the time, and I don't.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I think
there may
it's
not
random,
be
but
profiling.
Even if it weren't
yeah, I think
random,
it's random as well.
It's not something that I would fault them for.
Yeah, I'm not faulting them. I think, inshallah, maybe in the future there will be kind of more developed systems to kind of they know who they are looking for, and maybe.
But you can change, right? No one can see that the problem is like, the sort of what the problem is with sort of this idea that, okay, we know these people are fighting against extremism and we shouldn't treat them like that. But hey, so a human being, no one can see in the heart of a human being. And what if you change overnight, right? Something happens and you change your mind, right? So this is like the human being.
But how lucky you think that, for example, that you...
They wouldn't take that risk, right? That's my thinking, that they wouldn't take that.
But how...
Statistically, somebody named Faisal Said al-Mutar is probably going to be more problematic than, obviously there's Jihadi John, I'm just talking about statistically.
But I get upset. You know why I get upset? I think they're so misguided. Like every time I go to the United Kingdom and they check, like, so last time I went via Dublin and they had a different rule. So they said, put your liquids in a plastic bag. I put my liquids in a plastic bag. Turns out that they have changed the definition of liquid. So they wanted things like lipstick and cream, and that's not liquid, right? So I nearly got into a linguistic fight with them. Like, have you changed the meaning of liquid?
You know what to do? The best thing to do is when they're patting you down, just say, while they're patting you down, just smile at them very nicely and then say, oh, now I've got liquids in my pants. That was a very crude joke. I'm really sorry. But you guys are laughing.
Ali.
How could I avoid it? You have to. You guys, all of you would have made that joke. Never mind.
I wasn't expecting that coming out of nowhere from Ali.
Guys, pay attention. So the point is that they pay attention to, the perfume, but down the road, the radical imam is preaching freely, right? And sort of the radical leader is invited to the BBC and given a platform, like this Anjum Chaudhry guy who finally, he used to be like always on the BBC and now he's in prison.
Let's give billions of dollars to the Muslim Brotherhood, but make sure you take off your shoes.
Exactly. So I see that's the problem, that they look at this kind of stuff, but it's like the source where they enter people's minds and make the leadership.
I have a follow-up question on this because I think it's very important, because I remember when we were at that dinner, you mentioned in the UK when you were living there, you had, I think, neighbors who were extremists or something.
Oh, yeah, that's Abu Hamza was down the road. Yes, Abu Hamza was down the road. Do you know Abu Hamza?
Okay, yes. Can you tell us about this story, please?
So
Yes.
Abu Hamza was down the road and he lived there and at the time, my husband was my now husband, then my boyfriend. He was leading a tour in Yemen, and we had just met. I guess we had just met 3 months or something. So I was in the United Kingdom and he was in Yemen leading this tour. And he called me from there and he said, "Don't worry. When you switch on the TV, you will see there will be news of a kidnapping." But it wasn't us, it was the other company, the other tour company. They were the ones who were kidnapped. And it was, so the story, when he tells it, it's really spooky because the only reason he wasn't kidnapped and his group wasn't kidnapped was because they were passing a vegetable grocery store and decided, let's stop here and get some vegetables for dinner. And while they were busy buying the
falafels,
the vegetables, they looked and they saw this other tour. They moved, like and my husband says that he felt that something was wrong, kind of, but he didn't know what it was. He felt that I'm glad I'm not on that, in that car, something like that, but he didn't know what it was. So, and then later, so these poor people, they were, the tourists are the ones who really love the Middle East, right? These are the people who are really interested in the Middle East. People laugh at them. People say, don't go to the Middle East. It's too dangerous. They said, no, we want to go. You're idiots. It's a nice place. We love it there. So the tourists they come under attack, right? So that's one of the earliest examples. Anyway, so that tour group was kidnapped. And then they soon realized that it was not the usual friendly tribal kidnapping. In the past, the tribes would kidnap you and feed you, and be really nice to you, and they just wanted attention. But they heard the word Mujahideen. Yeah. So they realized they heard Mujahideen and they knew that's a completely different ballgame. And it was a very sad story because people were killed.
Oh, wow. And you're talking about this guy, Abu Hamza al-Masri, right?
Abu Hamza, the hook, yeah. He had planned it in London.
Wow.
Like it was planned from London down the road from us.
He was like Finsbury Park.
Yes, exactly. He was the one who plotted it. And then the kidnapping took place and people were killed. Also in the rescue mission, it was terrible, terrible, terrible. And of course, I couldn't believe it because I thought like I'd left Afghanistan behind, right? With all the terror and stuff. And hey, it was there again. But we couldn't, in the UK, you couldn't get rid of Abu Hamza because of human rights.
Yeah. But if he were in Egypt, they probably strip him of his citizenship and throw him in dark cell.
Wait, how was he related to Finsbury? You mentioned Finsbury. Wasn't
He was
Finsbury
the
Park
imam
the
there, I
attack?
think.
He was the imam there, yes.
Oh, he was the
Long
imam.
time ago, right?
Okay.
It was like
A long
Yeah,
time
yeah.
ago, yeah. That was sort of, the kidnapping was in 98.
is this the reason why you moved from the UK to the US? I mean, is that
No, I mean, even though, like, we found out what happened and who Abu Hamza was, and the fact that, like, you couldn't touch him because of his human rights, which is very funny, right? Like, Abu
Yeah.
Hamza has human rights.
When did you move to the US?
2008. So end of 2007, which is like 2008, yeah. 10 years
Oh,
ago.
2008.
Yeah,
Okay.
we
So,
said
so
it took ages to click, that because it was so confusing,
That's
right?
who he is.
Yeah, that and also how to make sense of it, right? Because it was actually then finally the Americans extradited him. So thank goodness for that. Well done, America.
So one thing, speaking of well done, America, I wanted to, one question that I think a lot of listeners are going to want to know your perspective on, specifically since, you have such a global experience and you have all these wonderful insights, is about Donald Trump. Like this whole thing, how do you think it's perceived in the places that you've worked with the people that you encounter? And
oh yes, obviously,
Yeah.
in the academia, people are horrified, right? They are horrified, and they think that America has taken a very bad turn, and sort of, and they I think it's hard for people to understand how could this happen, right? My sense is that the reason why people are wondering how could this happen is because we all have become, we don't share the same realities anymore. And that's very dangerous. We all, I think in the past, at least the media had this kind of capacity to create a shared representation of reality, right? Where everybody shared in the same reality that you didn't experience firsthand. But now it's so fragmented that people don't share the same reality. And that's something that truly terrifies me, because if you don't live in the shared reality and you don't know what half of your country thinks, and
no, this
how,
is like echo chambers.
yes. So and
that's a
and
huge
how
problem.
half of the country feels, right? And the fact that it didn't occur to you that this was happening. So I think we all sort of have to upgrade our worldview, basically. And
what are your
I
own
agree with
personal
you.
views on Trump?
You see, I mean, I'm so taken aback because he's something so completely new, right? And we never had anything like him before. So to me, what he signals is that we have entered an age of unpredictability, right? So that's what this signifies. I think in terms of the choice, I think when in times of crisis, people turn to figures of authority. Right? They feel more secure when they see a leader who projects extraordinary self-confidence. And because he had no fear of saying whatever came to his mind, right? That made him almost a hero. Because everybody else was so frightened, thinking about every little word they say and how it might come across, and don't want to say anything. So people, I think some people voted for him just out of frustration because they were so fed up with not being able to say what they think.
Yeah, and on the other hand, the other candidate was so calculated. And
yes,
so rehearsed,
and they were so
with
opposite.
Hillary Clinton,
They were so opposite in terms of smooth, prepared, and she is a super intelligent woman, right? So like Hillary Clinton is, and she had a lot of political experience as well. So for me, it was like interesting that someone who has sat at international meetings and has been in politics all her life, that the most experienced person lost it, right? And the completely inexperienced person won. And
so do you think that was a mistake?
I really don't know. What I know is that there is this tendency in America to root for the outsider. So in that sense, it's a repeat of what happened when Barack Obama was voted in, right? That their sense of they have this kind of romantic almost desire to give the guy who's an outsider a chance.
The candidate of change, right? The change, and Trump was the change candidate, while Hillary was the. Actually, I have a question for you.
But I just want to clarify this. So you think it was a change for the worse, Trump being elected, or no?
Well, it's super hard to know because since he came to power, I mean, it's been so unstable. The environment, the atmosphere in America is so.
That's a bad thing, isn't it?
It is absolutely, and also that it's very hard.
The last 7 months have been a disaster. Yeah,
I have a problem that I really can't. Where do I go to find out what is really going on? Right, because the media is not playing the role that they're supposed to play.
Well, I mean, don't you? That's probably the first thing I will disagree with you on in this sense. I think that one of the things that happened with the Trump presidency is that a lot of the people in the media who were trying to play, they were trying to be very neutral instead of being objective, because there's a big difference between being neutral and being objective. And I think that a lot of them are doing their jobs in the sense that now, they are getting scoops on the White House. They're actually going in and doing actual investigative journalism. They're finding out all these things about Russia. Every time the New York Times reports something, he says it's fake news, and then he fires somebody in his administration, which is what the New York Times predicted. So like these things, I think that it has kind of woken up the public. It's woken up liberals who were so busy with their transgender pronouns that they had completely forgotten that, the Barack Obama win wasn't a change. It was the first step in a very fragile process of progress.
Let's hope so. Yeah, I see a little bit of that. I see the New York Times sort of becoming less narrow-minded, let's say. Like when they have Barry Weiss and I mean, we have reached a time when someone writes something reasonable, we are relieved, huh?
Yeah.
And we praise it. We're like, oh my God, and they should publish things like that every day.
Actually, I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind, which is related to your field. I mean, I like, based upon my research, I mean, I'm not an academic in any sense, but I talk to lots of people, especially in the Middle East and stuff. And it is weird to say, I mean, my observation have been that many Middle Eastern seculars and liberals hate Hillary Clinton and Obama and seem to favor Donald Trump. Is this similar to what you have seen in Afghanistan or Pakistan? And it's like,
in Afghanistan, we always welcome whoever comes to power, right? So before Obama came to power, people made these carpets because his name, I mean, if you, Armin, you speak Farsi, so Obama's, right? He is with us.
Oh, wow.
There is this fun with Obama's name. He is with us in Farsi. So they had these carpets with Obama's, like Obama is with us. And we waited for 3 months to hear what was going on, the next direction that the US takes. And then he came up with, I must say, the most mediocre speech, which sort of didn't say anything really. So, but it's, with Trump, the Afghan, the current government managed to persuade him to make sure that the American troops stay longer and that they don't leave Afghanistan. That they say.
Successfully.
Which is exactly the opposite of what he said he would do.
Yeah. And
I like it when that happens.
I think that's kind of,
he had never been
a president.
In Iran, they love Obama and they hate Trump. Well, I think most of, not everybody, because Trump, obviously Obama was for removing sanctions and Trump is for increase. So that's an obvious choice for Iranians.
But I think people who thought that, they wanted someone who would be tough on terrorism, right? Among Muslims, because there are many Muslims who actually want this. And you don't hear that, right? Because it's not sort of an acceptable view. We're supposed to be we're supposed to be an endangered species that is in need of protection all the time, right? And even though like it's the same community that also produces those who cause trouble, right? So obviously they have the capacity.
There's also an element of I think rhetoric versus action. Like for instance, Obama, in his rhetoric, he was very apologetic. He's like, no, Islam's a religion of peace. We're going to do this. We're going to protect. But on the other hand, behind the scenes, like 7 Muslim majority countries were being bombed during him, which is more than any other president. And he had deported more illegal immigrants than any other president in history. On the other hand, and it was the same thing with Hillary, who was neocon, all that. Then on the other hand, you have Donald Trump, and he's like, yeah, we have to fight against radical Islam, and then he's going in sword dancing with the Saudis.
That was the worst. That was the worst.
Yeah. So there's this. There's also this element of, it's not just a matter of who is the toughest on terrorism. It's a matter of who acts like they're the toughest on terrorism, whether they truly are or not.
But it is unfair. I think it's unfair to say that Obama was good on terrorism. I think
no, I don't think he was good on terrorism. But what I'm saying is he was no different than any other Republican president. He wasn't that much different from Bush.
He continued some of Bush policies, that's for sure. But he also
a lot of them.
When it comes to like the Arab Spring, the issues were different. The issues that Bush faced was like 9/11, while what Obama faced was the Arab Spring, the post-war Iraq, the Iranian Green Revolution, the Syrian rebellion. There are so many things that Obama faced that are different than what Bush faced. So, and his response to them, I would say, if Bush was in power or Mitt Romney was in power, would have been a completely different approach. Especially, for example, just to give you an example, which is actually very relevant, during the debate between Mitt Romney and Obama, the first or second one, 2012. And Romney was saying that Russia was a bigger threat, that they might hack our elections and things like that. And Obama said, no, Russia is not actually a threat, and you are still in the Cold War mentality and stuff. While Mitt Romney was like, Russia is a problem. So in fact, for example, Obama downplayed a lot of the Russian influence, and he allowed them to do something in Syria. I think it would have been a complete opposite if, let's say, John McCain, who is completely anti-Russia, or Governor Romney would have been president. I just think it's like it would be a mistake to say that Obama and Bush were the same. I think that they were like probably 20%.
No, Faisal, I don't think they were the same. I don't think they were the same. I'm just saying that I don't necessarily think you can predict what another president would do in that situation. Like, for instance, with one thing, if it depends on what perspective you look at it with, one thing Obama did was he did more to make the U.S. energy independent. And that includes policies like fracking, which Democrats did not like, the Keystone Pipeline, which he supported. Right. So a lot of those things that he did, he's actually made the U.S. energy and petroleum independent in a way that no other president had before. So it depends on which angle.
Yes, wanted to ask a question from the beginning, and she didn't get a chance.
Well, I just I just wanted to just bring it back to Nushin's story and her journey and her life, because I get really interested in people, and I think you guys are wanting to get bore down into political things today. But
I think a balance of both is like, you need hummus and you need kebabs.
Yeah, that's good. We balance it out.
Nushin is so much fun to talk politics with, though. But anyway, Yaz, I want to know the answer to Yaz's question, though, too.
So I have two questions, and I'm going to ask them both because I probably won't ever get a chance to speak again. So I might as well just get them both out. My first question is, so where are you now, as like in your journey? So are you? I didn't actually hear the answer if you grew up Sunni or Shia, and I'm curious as to where you are now on that spectrum. Are you still a practicing Muslim or not, or a reformer, or what label should we tack onto your forehead? And my second question is, because you seem to have a lot of understanding of Muslims in Europe, a lot more than any of us. So I wanted to ask you about this, Douglas Murray's impression of how things are going in Europe. And I wanted to know, what your impression was of Europe these days. Like, how do you think things are going?
Okay, these are very good questions. Yeah. So let me tell you how I found out that I was Shia. That's a funny story.
Shia, she's Shia, yes.
Great. Outnumbered again.
It was in Afghanistan, but the Shia are a minority. And I was at school, and I was one of those, I was like kid, always like I had the answers, and I was a smart kid. I was very involved and engaged. So my teacher, my religion teacher said, who can show the class how to pray? And eager me raises her hand. I can show. So I went to the front of the class, and oh my God, as soon as I started, there was uproar. It's wrong, she did it wrong. They were getting heart attacks. So my teacher quick sends me back, and
you had your hands down
because
she didn't tie her hands
exactly. Up. So and I said it's correct. I've seen my grandma pray like that. And they said,
wow.
So I brought in the authority of my grandma. Like, and nothing. They were freaked out, God knows what they thought. I mean, they were really, really upset. So then the teacher called another girl, and she prayed differently, and I realized, blimey, I'm not, something is wrong. So I went home and I explained to my parents, and they said, that's because you're Shia. So I said, so what's the deal with the hands, right? And I said, oh, it's because, the Sunnis still hold on to the idols.
Yeah, they used to hold on to the idols under there, miniature idols.
Oh my God, is that the stories you guys tell?
That's the story.
Jeez. You people are obsessed with Sunnis. Can I just say that this is true for any demographic where there's like a majority powerful group and then a minority smaller group? Honestly, Sunnis don't even give Shias a second thought. I'm just gonna put that out there right now. Like, we barely ever think about Shias at all. It seems like you guys think about Sunnis and talk about Sunnis all the time.
On Twitter, they're gonna say we're still tribal.
Yeah, like I didn't know anything about Shias.
Actually, that's not true.
It's completely irrelevant.
Because it's a minority, right?
Because it's a minority. That's just the way it is. It's like Australia and New Zealand.
But in Iran,
right?
they don't
New
care about
Zealanders will
Sunnis.
get really upset and they'll be like, I'm a Kiwi, I'm not an Aussie, and they'll get really worked up about it. Whereas Australians, if you call them a New Zealander by accident, they're like, whatever. No, I'm actually Australian. Like, you know what I mean?
But this dismissive attitude was the same with Sunnis in Iran, because maybe in places where Shia and Sunnis meet each other a lot, the accusations are a lot. But in Iran, it's like, these idiot Sunnis, they don't know us. Like, it's just something that you
because that's where you're the majority Shia.
So the other part of Yaz's question, Nushin, is what about now? Are you going to be celebrating Eid al-Ghadir that's coming up this weekend?
What about now? So that's the thing is.
I mean, did you grow up religious? We didn't ask you this. Were your parents like actively Orthodox or something?
No. My parents were like, they were. My father, he lost his faith. I told you that there was this story in the family that there were two things that triggered sort of departure from religion. One was that the family was super, super strict. And I think when minorities tend to become super, super strict because they are in a minority position. So the fear of losing culture becomes huge, just like we see here in the West with minorities. So they were very strict to the point that it sort of turned against religion. And some people, they just needed a good explanation, right? Because education had arrived and people had this other alternative. They would go to school and see that there's this other way of looking at the world. So they would ask questions like, so why do we need to fast, right? And no one could give them answers. So religion had become this kind of a rigid set of rules without a spirit, right? So
you don't ask questions.
You just follow,
You just do it.
So, and I think the reason for that is because they didn't have themselves a proper religious education. So they really didn't know how to answer the questions. And that's for smart people, that's very unsatisfactory, of course, right? And that's actually what happened in Europe when with science came, people started asking questions and at some point religion kind of had lost its power.
So do you remember when you lost your faith?
I haven't lost my faith. You see, that's the thing. I was thinking that I'm not so sure that leaving religion is the solution. And the reason for that is obviously, if you guys are atheists, so you believe in the evolution, obviously, right? Because but when you look at the evolution, then you can see that like for a vast majority of the time, of course, most of human history, when you look at it from the perspective of the evolution, belief was very much part of human organization and human life, right? That's the fact. And if you have this kind of historical perspective, then the arrival of science and the arrival of this very different way of looking at the world as the material sense, right? And separate from the subject and meaning when the mountains are not imbued with meaning, let's say, right? That is very, very new.
Faisal is scared that I'm going to attack you. He's warning me not to attack you. I'm not going to attack you. I'm just going to have two corrections. Atheism is not a belief in evolution. Atheism is just a lack of belief in God. You know, even without evolution, if you don't have an answer for something, you don't believe in it. Just like you said, if you don't have answers, you don't believe in something. And another thing is that just because something is common doesn't make it true, right? Like we believe we're looking for patterns. So that's why something that might explain why people always look for explanations in nature. But we're also naturally violent. That, you know, we're also, you know, that doesn't mean.
And that's okay. Lakum dinakum waliya din. That's okay. Well, let's just.
I'm not forcing anybody.
We're secular jihadists.
I'm not forcing atheism on anybody. I'm just trying to.
No, it's good. It's to explain that to listen. This is a good contrast because what Nushin is saying is that there is the relevance of people believing in religion throughout history.
Believing in something, right? Something that gave meaning to life,
right?
Like
there was Greek mythology, there was Nordic mythology, there's, you know, then later there was Judaism, there's Hinduism, and on the other hand, that doesn't necessarily make it true.
No,
and it just comes down to whoever believes
It's not about truth.
That's it.
It's about, so the fact is that this is how we evolved, right? This is how we evolved, and I don't think that you can get rid of it like that. Let's say you will need to believe in something.
I'm getting messages in the chat so I'm going to hold myself back, but I'm not going to.
So, but let me explain what I mean.
That's okay. I think Nushin knows that.
So what I can explain to you what I mean.
Different
so my view of religion is that I don't believe that human beings are great as they are, right? That we are perfect as we are. What I believe is that you have to improve yourself because as we are, too. Exactly. So then you think so, you know, because you're aware that you're not perfect because of obviously anyone who's a bit self-critical knows that a human being is we have all sorts of terrible emotions, right? There is envy, there is revenge, there is all sorts and violence and hatred. All this is and of course evil, right? So that's something that rationality doesn't explain, or the rationality explains it, but they say it's part of the circumstances that make people like that, right?
So it's rational to say that it's from the devil.
Not the devil, no, but it's in human nature, both good and evil, right? Being a good human being or being a bad human being, right? So to be aware of that and overcome that.
Stop. Faisal's getting mad at me. Okay, Nushin, we'll move on. It's
Faisal,
okay.
Nushin is a big girl, okay? I don't think she's going to get upset if we disagree with her. She's a tough person.
It's fine. So that's my worry.
It's fine.
And that if we believe we are perfect as we are, right? Then you're not going to try to be a better person, let's say.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to very quickly say that I don't believe in any fairy tales, but I always want to get
By the
better.
way, I also think that humanism is a religion. Unfortunately,
it's a belief system,
I'm a massive
right?
fan of it.
No, not everything that's a belief system is a religion. But just
let's just change the subject.
I'm just gonna I don't think you heard me. Just Nushin, if you get a chance, read The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris.
Yes, and you see again. I look at what happened in the West when people became atheists, right? Because here we have a good example, an example that has a long history where you can see what happens next when religion is removed. And what I see, frankly, is that ideology has taken the place of religion for those who have left behind religion. And then you have a whole host of new age religions, right? That have emerged. People believe in witches, sort of, there's this feminist kind of mother goddess religion. I mean, in any European city you go, you will see these shops where they sell crystals and they sell candles and knickknacks, and it is for this other religion where they worship, the mother goddess. The fact is, but what this shows is that the need to believe in something that is outside of this world hasn't disappeared. right?
So can we go to the second? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Finish up what you were saying.
And we have had atheism for a long time in the West. And what we can see is that this need
all over the world.
Yes, but especially in the West where it became, like they're allowed to be atheists and it's fine, right? They don't have social pressure to be Christian, for example. It's absolutely fine for them. That the need didn't disappear and people are turning for alternative ways of reintroducing spirituality to their lives. Yoga is super popular, as you know, right? Meditation is super popular. Mindfulness meditation is super popular. So it didn't disappear. It's resurfacing in the fragmented new age religions as well. So how do you account for that?
Spirituality without religion by Sam Harris.
What Nushin is talking about actually aligns more with Yuval Noah Harari, because he actually talks about all of these things as myths. Like in the sense that communism is a religion, humanism is a religion, liberalism is
if everything
that is actually, I think, the book that Ali is talking about, Sapiens.
I don't think I agree with that, Ali. If
you would love that.
Your criteria for what's a religion is so low that almost any four people getting together and agreeing with something.
Religion is something that has potential for dogma. That's my whole thing. If you have
religion is a subcategory of dogma.
Right, exactly.
All right, never mind.
Oh my God. I just want to ask this. I just want to follow up with the question that I don't know if you listen to Sam Harris. Have you listened to that Sam Harris? Douglas, are you familiar with Douglas Murray, Nushin, by any chance?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you probably, because me and Asra have. So have you read his latest book, the one about Europe? And
yes,
I think it's called The End of
Strange Death of Europe.
Yes, and he mentions that exactly.
So what do you think? What do you think? I mean, what do you think of the conclusion of the book that Europe is going to a very terrible direction?
Yes, absolutely. I agree, and it has to do, as he mentions it, with the crisis of meaninglessness, right? Because people, in order, I mean, I was listening to the other podcasts that came before you speak to me, guys, and I heard the very sort of correct complaint that people don't side with liberals from the Muslim world, right? The people who should side with the liberals from the Muslim world don't side with them. And I was thinking the reason why they don't do it is because they don't have, because they don't believe in God, let's say, right? So their values are relative. They say all values are the same. And how do I know that this value system is better than that value system, since all value systems are the same? Right?
Relativism,
which is in a world where there is no God, right? And it's all human made. It's all human made.
No.
And
that makes the plan a bit, because I've read. I mean, Douglas Murray's argument, I think, is that atheism without kind of a system of moral ethics, would kind of lead to a sense of moral relativism that many people in the West right now who are atheists. I mean, yes, you as Armin, as a dogmatic atheist who writes about atheism 24/7, you have more
that's all
of
bullshit. Okay, that's not me. That's you have not more Armin. There's so many.
You talked about the moral landscape.
Atheists are not less moral than.
No. It's not. This is not the argument. The argument is not actually this. Sam Harris made the argument of the moral landscape that people can have morality without religion, and you can have a scientifically designed or intelligent design morality. But what happened is that the argument of Douglas Murray, which I don't solely agree with, but it's a very interesting argument to understand, is that because of lack of religion, and that kind of led to a sense of moral relativism, not lack of morality, but moral relativism. Now, when they are faced with a new threat of Islamic extremism, or a new migration from Islamic extremism.
That's absolute bullshit, because people with religion, they are more moral relativists, and they just use their relative morality and say, well, God agrees with me. And every single one of them just use their God authority to just to give authority.
I agree with Armin. I actually
give authority to their relative morality.
Can I tell you something to illustrate what Maury was saying? Because he was interested in Western converts, right? He was interested in Western converts and what made them convert to Islam. And what guys, you're frozen. apart from Yasmin. Okay. Yeah. And what
but we can hear you.
Yeah.
Though.
So what he found out speaking to these people was that they reached their 30s and their life is one where, they go out, they enjoy themselves, they go clubbing, they have their job, etc. But like one night in the nightclub, they think, well, is this all? Is this what life is supposed to be about? And they feel this emptiness, right?
No, they don't. No, they don't, though. They don't. Most people without God, they look for meaning in life, and guess what? They find it. In fact, it's easier to find meaning in life without God because you don't have to.
Armin, she's just explaining Douglas Murray's thing. I don't agree with him either.
The ones who turned to Islam, this was the path. So this was what happened to them. And I do think that a weakness of the West, a weakness that the Islamists correctly identified, is that they don't know who they are, right? They really don't know what their values are and who they are and what they stand up for, right? And it is from this moral confusion that they can't decide. So which ones among the people in the Muslim world should we support, right? If they knew exactly who they are, if they were grounded, they would have been able to say, okay, the liberals are the ones who share our worldview. We are not ashamed of it. We stand by it. We are proud of it. And we are going to support them. The reason precisely that they don't have this ability and waver and go back and forth and often end up siding with ultra-religious people, right, is precisely because it's so confusing not to have a proper value system.
I like the way Faisal puts it. He says that they're just boring, they wear shorts and they eat chicken nuggets and they're looking for something exotic and fun. Go ahead, Armin.
Yeah, I mean, especially that
the
has
implication
been
that they don't have a value system. That's
I
a
just
problem.
want to respond to that really quickly. I just think that a crisis of meaning is something natural that always happens in many people's lives. And it will happen with Islam, with Christianity, without Islam, without Christianity. Whether you're an atheist or not, you go through the times left that you don't know if you're going to the right direction. We all have that. What Islam does and what Christianity does is take advantage of those moments, as try to fill it with this, try to identify this natural thing that happens as a disease, and try to use that moment to give you something to make soldiers out of you for their cause, right? So.
Yes and no. You see, again, I don't believe that religion is a conspiracy. A conspiracy you can't hold on for centuries, right?
It's not a conspiracy. It's a meme. It doesn't have to have this genius people in background being like, we're taking advantage of people. Memes work without having these conspiracy people behind the
guys,
monitor.
Can I give you an example, right? Again, so because without examples, I can't illustrate what I mean because, it's hard.
No, this is great.
Yeah, so let me give you an illustrate. My grandfather, he lost his wife and all of his children to disease, which kind of would traumatize anyone, right? Like to have this kind of mass death. And he started again. He got another family. He got married. He had children. He had the second family and struggled through life. And I don't know about the rest of the people who, came out as a result of that decision to hold on to life despite this enormous tragedy. I'm one of the results, right? And I think that the kind of despair he would have, without believing that there is something there, I don't think he could have carried on with life, right?
This is like Ali's aunt.
Sorry?
Your aunt with a 3-year-old aunt. Ali will tell you a story after you're done. But he has a very similar story.
We don't know that. We don't know that because religion has taken the monopoly over providing people with this grief moments and these providing meaning and providing counsel. And guess what? These people with this religious authority have no understanding of how human psychology works, how where these feelings come from. And they are the least people that we should go to for providing us with meaning and understanding and providing with
people
comfort.
Themselves,
no, but the thing is that
if
religion didn't have this monopoly, if they didn't have this much government support, I'm pretty sure by now we would have figured out much better ways to address these.
Again, knowing where these feelings from, knowing where they come from, doesn't help you with grief, right? Because
actually does, because feelings and emotions are not
but it does
spiritual things. these are
That's
things
for
that are
different
happening in your
people.
brain. If you do understand the mind, if you understand the brain, you are going to be able to come up
Armin,
with better
if I can
answers.
I want to interject
Yeah,
for a moment
yeah.
here because I am a like-minded, atheist, anti-theist as well. And I want to tell you that when I lost my best friend, for a moment, I was in so much turmoil. I was in so sad and I was in so much grief that in order to appease myself, I would just for a moment, I would tell myself, you know what? Maybe it is true. Maybe it is true that she's in heaven and I'm going to meet her there. And then it'll be okay because then I can hug her again. And I would tell myself these things, even I knew they were complete lies, but I would tell myself these things because I was like healing myself. And it was just the thought of knowing that my friend Tiffany, who was also an atheist, if she knew that I was telling myself these things, she'd probably be like, stop being so stupid. So that's what made me stop doing it. But it was so comforting. And I understand what about Nushin's grandfather and Ali's
And when
aunt.
I lost my mom, you know what I found comforting? The fact that she wasn't in hell.
Yes,
Because
everybody is different.
My
You're absolutely
mom died
correct.
as an atheist, and
My friend-
guess what? The
my friend was a
religion
kafra. She
doesn't
would have been
come
in
up
hell
with
too.
carrots only. They come up with carrots because they have a stick. The stick is
I
the
don't
point of
disagree
their
with
religion.
you. I don't disagree with you. But what I'm agreeing with Nushin when she's saying there's a point where it's so emotional that the rational is insignificant.
Of course, you don't blame people for their irrationality, but you also point out that it's irrational. And
Not necessarily. But
yeah, you do, because at the end of the day, when people are emotional and irrational, you don't blame them for that. And if whatever comfort they're seeking in, you give it to them. But at the end of the day, on a net basis, a society moves forward better with rational solution than emotional one. And
I'm okay with people being vegans, even though I personally don't want to be a vegan. Like, we could just let people live the way they want to live. As long
guys,
as
hold on just a second. Just because we know we're not going to solve
don't
the religious
don't say
controversy.
let people live, because telling people something is irrational is not forcing them to stop believing in it.
I'm not condoning
Nushin,
that.
can you have the last word? You're going to have the last word. I know there's going to be counter arguments. Everybody, listen, because we're over an hour and 30 minutes. So I just want to have let our guests have the last word, and whether we disagree or not, that's your thing.
Question one, I would say I'm not for throwing away religion, but I'm very much for reforming it. So that's the one thing, because I do think that, it's easy for us people in the West, the life that we live, it's easy to do without, until some moment when you discover that you have cancer and etc., then it's very different. But it is possible to live in the West and think you don't need anything higher for a long time until some big catastrophe hits. Then it really becomes a difficult as something else. So I am for reform. As to Europe, well, I was in Hamburg when 9/11 was plotted, right? So I met those students, not the ones who carried it out, but people in their circle, and it appeared to me that again it was a similar thing, like one of them was working in a building for rich people, and he was a student as well, and he was cleaning the trash cans there, and he became radicalized. Like, he became super religious from being a playboy initially. And he was saying that what frightened him was there was never anything in the trash cans, that these people were so wealthy, but they had like no life. There was no life in their apartments. They were like empty apartments. They go to work, they come, they don't cook, they don't have families, nothing. That was something that really frightened him. And made him then, of course, then what happens next is when they go to mosque in search of, let's say, an answer for the meaning of life, unfortunately, the mosques are hijacked by the Salafis. So what they get is then a rigid political ideology. So that's my understanding. But where they go there in search of meaning, because the West is super confusing. And right now they themselves don't know who they are, where they're going, what their mission is in the world, right? They have no idea. They can't say a lot of things. They've created so many taboos. And the fact that it's the left that has created taboos, which is like superstition, right? The taboos are superstition. And the left is the party that the hard left has taboos. It excommunicates. It has a battle between good and evil, right? And they're the good, the evil, or whatever, anyone who's not like them. And that they're so detached from reality that someone like Dave Rubin, my goodness, if they think he is a Nazi sympathizer, that's so detached from reality.
Me too. I was also named a Nazi by a German newspaper, along with Rubin.
My friends,
me and Faisal too. Actually,
that's your atheism that didn't lead to rationality. You see? What happened was that people didn't become more rational. Their irrationality comes out
because religious people are so rational.
No, they're not.
Right?
They're not either. That's what I'm saying. I don't say that religious people are rational. What I'm saying is that the form it's unfortunately because we are both rational and irrational. Then that is our condition as human beings. Mm-hmm. When we leave religion, we don't necessarily leave behind irrationality. It's still there, but it comes out in very weird places, right? That the most rational of people, the hard left, are the ones who have blasphemy. And that's why they actually sympathize with Islamophobia ideas, right? Because that's blasphemy. There are many things you can't say. They focus on your language and they listen very carefully. And one wrong word, right? It's like praying wrong. When you pray and you pronounce one word wrong, whoa, you blaspheme. It's very similar, right? It's like, oh, you said that word.
Atheism, though.
Yes, but they didn't become rational, right? They excommunicate and they have new taboos where it's quite extraordinary. Like minorities, you can't talk about them. That's a big taboo, for example. So in a way, that's the funny thing, that the best evidence, like what happens when people leave religion, that they don't necessarily become rational, is, well, the left, which left religion and they haven't become rational. I'm afraid, and it's a fact. So then you have to say, how do I account for this irrationality, right? Because they should be super rational.
Faisal is not letting us respond. We have so much to say.
Okay, guys. No, I'm not going to
what
either.
You're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. And in fact, an example of that is when they say you can't say colored people, but you can say people of color.
Yeah, or something like this is bizarre. It's much closer to superstition, right?
Yeah. My last question is, how can people? Are you planning to write another book? And how can people follow you on social media, or if you have a website?
Yeah, I'm not very active on Twitter, and that's because it takes so much time, right? And you have all these trolls, and before you know, you spend an hour telling people, no, I'm not a Nazi. So it's a waste of.
That's something we can all relate to.
Because
Zionist Nazi
or whatever they come up with, right? So I don't have the time for that. If I have a message, it is that we share the same kind of concern, that we have entered an age where we have no idea what's going on. And that's shared across the board, whether you're conservative, whether you're left-wing, whether you're liberal, whether you're a believer Muslim, also. That's what we share, right? The fear, what is going on in this world, and that we can't figure out. And I think that, we all need to be aware of our blind spots and try to take that into account. And we all need to communicate more. So for the people on the left, for example, they're stuck in the past. Capitalism is not the worst system in the world. We know that because we have seen communism being implemented and fail again and again. So they care for the poor, find them and take care of them, right? That's how they should upgrade their system. They care for the oppressed.
But the left is not a representative of atheism.
But basically, their mission, that they care of those who are neglected, that's a great mission. But I think they're stuck in an outdated system, right? Which is formulaic.
I think they are too, as are religious people.
With the nationalists, ethnic nationalists, like, you have to accept that we live in multicultural societies and this is the new reality. And you have to find a way to live with it. And I would say the conservative Muslims share a lot more with their values than they do with liberals, right? They believe in family, they believe in religion, the role of women is at home. Like, can't you see these are your allies, right? So they can get something out of multiculturalism, actually, if they also update their system and take that into account. Because they tend to just see kind of in immigrants, mostly they tend to see a problem, right? And that makes it harder for us to engage with them. So the lesson I learned was that moderation, communication, dialogue. That's what I learned from life. And I think all of us need that. No one has a monopoly over truth. We have one slice of truth, and that is truth. Like atheism, one slice of truth, that is truth. But the reality is way more complex. And you reach it only when you speak.
Anyway, Nushin, thank you so much. Before this becomes another, there is going to be the whole there's a war, and all of this stuff is going to begin before all that stuff starts on this podcast right now, because we're not going to solve these issues. And obviously we have disagreements, but I think the stuff that you've said towards the end, all of us can align on. So
and I agree with your point at the end, and as you said, we need to argue these things and talk about these things more, not less.
Yeah. So I think this was awesome.
Freedom of speech at any cost.
No, I wish we could keep going for another hour, but we can't. But thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure,
this was
guys.
so much fun.
I very much enjoyed
lots
it.
and lots of fun.
And we will link to your book as well as your Twitter, even though you don't use Twitter much, on the description when we.
That would be kind, and I look forward to staying in touch with you guys. My main thing was I wanted to get to know you guys, so that was a good excuse.
Yeah, it was great meeting you.
Same here.
Yeah, you're very sweet.
And hope to see you as well sometime next time.
You live up to your name, Nushin.
That miracle and something. Okay, guys, thank you.
Subhanallah. Have a great.
Okay, thank you guys.
Have a great evening.
Okay. Bye.
Good night.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the gracious support of the Illuminati and the great state of Israel. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. In the meantime, we greatly appreciate the support of our current donors. Please consider supporting by sharing the podcast with your fellow heathens or by donating at patreon.com/SJME.